Despite the size of the Gilded Coast, the majority of the monsters are contained to one city, Metropolis. When the Iris of Hell opened nearby, the martially inclined charged in, bore arms, and quickly painted the streets in their own blood. Lydia Palishde was more patient, barricading herself in the Cathedral of Fayette. There she would study the monsters overrunning her city with her fellow academics. Their research provided the Wire Weavers with weaknesses to exploit and turn the tide against the never-ending flood of Hellspawn. While the aristocrats in Clothopolis looked down on their sister city for their demonic infestation, the students at Lydia's school prided themselves on how few demons escaped. After all, there was research to be done, and their research required live subjects. Knowledge is power, so due to the transitive property, a subclass with the most knowledge would have the most power. Unfortunately, when you start spitting facts from the monster manual, you get accused of metagaming, or not reading the vibe of your cousin's wedding. I'm sorry, Jessica, I thought you wanted to know about the Beholder's eye stalks on your special day. Thankfully, the School of Monsters is here to help you with that, giving you an in-character reason to know your stats about monsters. It's for your Ray Stans types, your Dipper Pines, or your Velma Dinkleys. It turns out the best thing you can be in Dungeons & Dragons is not a rage monster or a holy warrior. The best thing you can be is prepared.
But you know what I like a lot more than materialistic things? Knowledge.
This video is brought to you by my patrons on Patreon. You can join my Patreon to get the written version of this subclass. It's up in the top right corner of the video. Thank you very much. Now we'll start it.
But you know what I like a lot more than knowledge? Materialistic things?
Wizards cast spells. Didn't we already do this? Wizard and Sorcerer are probably the most comparable classes of all because they just cast spells. That's their whole deal.
He does exactly what I do, but better.
Wizards have a few more spells and they're pretty specific. I'm not going to go into all of them because that would be a really long video, and because Davy Chappie already made that video and I don't want to fight him. Really, the only ability that a wizard gets that isn't casting a spell is Arcane Recovery, which lets you recover spell slots to cast more spells on a short rest. The subclasses are all about the different schools of magic. Illusion wizards cast illusion spells, Abjuration wizards cast abjuration spells, and Evocation wizards prevent heartburn by being basic.
Where's the kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
There are a few other options like Chronergy and Graviturgist, but those are in Wildmount, which is basically Homebrew. We're sticking to official sources here. This is a Homebrew show. That's the joke. The joke is that. Lydia's School of Monsters was surrounded by horrible abominations crawling out of the very bowels of hell, so it's no surprise that all the students who chose to attend this school would have a hardened will. This gave them advantage on saving throws against being frightened, and if a creature managed to frighten them, at the end of the frightening effect, they would become immune to frightening effects from that creature in the future. Dragons, Rakshasa, and Rougarou are just less scary the second time you see them. Although maybe Lydia's students were less scared because they knew they had the power of knowledge, giving them proficiency with the Arcana skill and doubling their proficiency bonus to checks they used with the skill.
This ecto-containment system that Spengler and I have in mind is going to require a load of bread to capitalize.
They had a lot in common with knowledge domain clerics, though in my studies I found that Lydia's school was publicly funded and was not a religious institution. All of this diligent academic work made them great at getting research done with very little rest.
Did you sleep here?
Only for a few hours.
As part of a short rest, they were able to pick a number of creature types equal to their proficiency bonus. When they rolled initiative later in the day against one of these types of creatures, they would immediately learn the creature's damage resistances, immunities, and vulnerabilities, and be able to declare these to their party members before the first round of initiative. If there was a creature that was hidden from them that fit in one of these types, they would be able to do this as a reaction after the creature was revealed to them. There were quite a few students who adapted a tome of Volo's Guide to Monsters into their own personal spellbook, writing in the margins and whatnot. Of course, all of this knowledge was useless if the wizard had nothing to capitalize with. That's why at the 6th level, School of Monsters wizards were able to learn 2 cantrips from any spell list with a few requirements. These cantrips had to deal damage, and had to deal a type of damage that the wizard didn't already deal with their cantrips. Popular options were Vicious Mockery, Sacred Flame, and of course, Eldritch Blast. When you think about it, students who indebt themselves to higher education are scarcely different than warlocks who indebt themselves to higher powers. The only difference being that patrons, of course, don't transfer your debt to your next of kin when you die.
Oh, I made myself sad.
When these wizards were able to exploit damage vulnerability, they would catch the monsters off guard, forcing a wisdom saving throw on them, and frightening them until the end of the wizard's next turn if they fail. Frightening effects were very helpful to the wizards, as it stopped the monsters from getting closer. Despite their stalwart resolve, they still only had a d6 hit die. After years of studying frightening foes, these wizards became repositories of lore. As a keeper of the lore, School of Monsters wizards learned legend lore for free at level 10. They could even cast it once per day without using material components. Now, that's a spell that lets players know about a person, place, or thing of legendary renown. It takes 10 minutes to cast, uses a 5th level spell slot, and uses 250 gold worth of incense. So, DMs, please, give your players good information. Give them good lore. They spent all of this stuff to get good lore, and you wrote good lore, and you're so excited about your lore, and you say, oh, I wish I could tell my players my lore. I want to dump my lore so bad. And then they spend a 5th level spell slot, and you're like, oh, I don't know if we should give them lore. Give them the lore! But even if your DM doesn't want to give you the good stuff, as a keeper of the lore, there are certain advantages to casting legend lore in your special way. They vary depending on whether or not you studied a person, place, or object. If you chose a person, you gain an intimate understanding of their tactics and preferences, giving a number of creatures equal to your intelligence modifier, advantage on weapon attacks against that creature, and advantage on saving throws against spells and abilities they use. If you choose a place, you know the most direct route to this location. While inside it, you get to ignore difficult terrain, you can't be surprised while you're awake, and you have advantage on saving throws against any traps. You can also pass this knowledge onto a number of creatures equal to your intelligence modifier. Finally, if you choose an object, you and a number of creatures equal to your intelligence modifier get to ignore magical item requirements for that item. Your friends can also cast Remove Curse on that object using your intelligence modifier in case you're not there to get rid of the bad juice yourself. The only requirement to passing on these abilities to another person was that you had to be able to communicate with them in some way. This led to a lot of wizards learning the sending spell and just hanging out at Lydia's school, while a wire weaver handled the dirty business for them.
Guy in a chair.
Level 10. More like level tenured. Unfortunately, at higher levels, vulnerabilities became rarer and rarer for the monsters of Atropolis. But oftentimes, the power of belief is more potent than actual facts.
We'll use the Force. That's not how the Force works.
At level 14, School of Monsters wizards gained creative interpretation. This allowed them to force an intelligence saving throw on a creature equal to their wizard spell save DC. If the creature failed, the wizard would get to choose a type of damage that the creature would become vulnerable to, provided they didn't resist or have immunity to this damage.
Right in the round tables.
They could bend the rules of reality an amount of times per day equal to their intelligence modifier. Eldritch Blast was also incredibly popular for this, with each beam dealing 2d10 force damage, but the monster wizards functioned mostly as support. So the real damage came from their party members, like a paladin who gets to unload with some serious radiant damage, or a fighter with an absurd amount of attacks with magical piercing damage. Did you know that pit fiends are weak to magical piercing damage? They can be if you want them to be. This final ability and the other abilities of the class pair very well with Wizard's other ability, casting spells. Because you can have a huge variety of spells, you can always be prepared for what kind of creatures you'll come up against. I'm pretty sure every type of damage is covered on the Wizard spell list at some point. You don't even have to restrict yourself to cantrips. You could unload with higher level spells like Meteor Swarm or Chain Lightning, Cone of Cold, or Fireball, using all of those to exploit weaknesses that technically shouldn't exist. It even takes a weaker spell like Elemental Bane and makes it pretty good, since that clears a creature of resistance to a type of damage and adds 2d6 extra damage to the first attack made of that type per round, which would mean that you could have a Firebolt at level 17 that deals 8d10 plus 4d6 fire damage. And that's around 72 with median rolls, from a cantrip. That's like all wizards can do though. So pick some spells, and now we're gonna multi-class. More than anything, members of the School of Monsters benefit from a wide variety of damage types, so multi-classing with any caster and getting extra cantrips to spread out that damage variety is very helpful. Artificer and Eldritch Knight are great ways to get cantrips while still being able to utilize your high intelligence modifier. Multi-classing with Warlock would get a little more messy, but then you could add invocations to Eldritch Blast, like Agonizing Blast, to add your charisma modifier to the damage. Of course, that is multi-ability dependent. You're going to need intelligence and charisma to maximize that potential. Rogue would take advantage of your expertise in Arcana with just a 1-level dip, turning you into a pretty solid skill monkey. Heck, if you use the Skill Expert feat, School of Monsters Wizard, Knowledge Domain Cleric, Rogue, and Ranger, you could have 6 expertise skills by level 5. But you don't need any skill to playtest this class, you just need to join my Patreon. At the $5 tier, you'll get access to this and all of the other subclasses in written form, as well as every episode of Building Character in character sheet form. That's over 6,000 character sheets, since they all go from level 1 to 20, so you can set up a nice and easy one-shot. Even at the $1 tier, you can vote for the subclass you want to see next. The College of Fate Bards tempt destiny with risky ranged attack maneuvers, or you could vote for the Oath of Brilliance Paladin, which excels in speed and strength. If you can't join the Patreon, that's fine, I understand. Just like the video, subscribe for more, and leave me a nice comment. Nice comments help the algorithm even more. And come back next week for more from the Gilded Coast of Moria.